All right, you guys, as you can see by the thumbnail, I'm back with another one like the other one. So check it out, you guys. I got another banger for you. This story right here is actually based on a story that I ran in the past that's called the LA County Jail 3400 B-roll. It's about the gang module, the forced lawn directive. So just to put it in context and to summarize it for you guys, the main part of this story was about Frank Lujan, Little Scarecrow from Northside Redondo, and Christian Knighton, Belon from Northside Redondo. It starts out by describing the events surrounding their controlling case, which was a murder one, strong arm robbery with the gun enhancement. I'll run through the details of how it all happened in a minute, but first I kind of want to map this story out and explain the chronology of events to you guys so that you guys have a better idea exactly what happened and why this follow-up is important. In a nutshell, this is the underlying purpose for this follow-up story. So after catching this first body, Little Scarecrow and Pelon end up in the LA County Jail where they catch a second body in the gang module, 3200 on Baker Road. There's backstories about how they were convicted, what happened while they were fighting their case, and then other things that happened years later while they were in prison. And I'm going to explain all this to you guys as I walk you through this story. But obviously, when you're catching these kind of cases and you're taking these types of penitentiary chances with someone where you could possibly end up with the death penalty or LWOP, you might encounter certain scenarios or certain situations that might make it necessary for you to enter into a lifelong pact or a blood oath that's only between you and your crime. Something that's just between you two and something that you both agree to take to the grave. This is the highest level of loyalty that exists within this lifestyle. And for those of you that just watched the video that I just dropped on Baby Joker and Demon getting hit, and again, this type of loyalty goes above and beyond any type of gang ties or any other commitments that you might have invested your loyalty in. Because now you're talking about dirt that you might have done with someone that could potentially be detrimental if it ever gets exposed. If you understand the point that I'm trying to make, then you get it. If you don't, then don't waste any more time trying to figure it out. In simple terms, the point that I'm trying to make for the purpose of understanding this story is that sometimes you might invest real loyalty in someone based solely on one event or one action that might have happened in the past. Little Scarecrow and Pelon made a similar pact, and they vowed to keep this pact until they were in their graves. And this is something that Little Scarecrow not only took serious, but it was something that he stood on for years on end, regardless of the personal sacrifices he had to make, and regardless of how this had a devastating effect on some of the relationships he had with his biological family. Again, I'm going to go into all the details, but for the record, Little Scarecrow helped Pelon get found not guilty for the first body they were charged with on the streets during the liquor store robbery. He agreed to take the stand and basically incriminated himself for the sole purpose of clearing Pelon. And I'm going to tell you guys why. So at the time when all this was going on, there was a Mexican mafia member by the name of Armando Ochoa, who they call Perico from Primera Flats. And Perico was someone that Little Scarecrow had an immense amount of respect for. He referred to him as his padrino. And after hearing about the circumstances of his case and how both of these guys were about to get wiped out, Perico reasoned with Little Scarecrow that it didn't make any sense for them both to go down on the same case. Perico didn't want to talk about the circumstances surrounding the homicide, but he told Little Scarecrow, if you feel in your heart that you were more culpable in what happened, then do the honorable thing and cut the brother loose. And then Perico explained to Little Scarecrow that he had taken a body for his older brother when he was younger, and that it was the right thing to do. It was something that he righteously believed in. So based on Perico being the voice of reason, and obviously because of the influence that he had over Little Scarecrow stepped up to the plate and got Pelon cleared on that first homicide. Anyways, they still had the in-house body that they caught in the LA County Jail, but that didn't negate the fact that Little Scarecrow helped Pelon get one foot back out the door, closer to freedom. So with that in mind, fast forward about 10 or 12 years later, while these guys are in prison doing their time. By then, both of them had gotten caught up in the ugly side of politics, and they ended up on S&Ys. Pelon would end up catching a life sentence on the second body anyway, but while they were in the system, Pelon gets caught up in several questionable situations, and despite whether he was right or wrong, Little Scarecrow still had his back and continued to demonstrate the loyalty that he had for this guy, because Little Scarecrow said that's what he believed in. When you got someone's back, you got their back for life. And when it came to someone like Pelon who had been through the type of things that they had been through, it wasn't even a question in his mind. Little Scarecrow said it himself that he didn't care whether Pelon was right or wrong. None of that mattered. that was his homeboy and he still had his back no matter what. So now fast forward a few years later. This is about 15 years later since they've been convicted, and they had been on the yard together. So while they're out there on these SNYs at different prisons, for whatever reason, Bellon decides to break their pact. And he starts talking about the case, and he starts talking ill about little Scarecrow. Something that was unprovoked and unwarranted, especially after everything that little Scarecrow had done. Little Scarecrow said that he honestly thought Bellon was losing his mind because a lot of the backbiting and the self-embellishing that he was doing didn't make any sense. And just so you guys know, part of the pact that little Scarecrow and Bellon made was not only vowing unwavering loyalty to each other, but also to never speak on the case or delving into the details of what happened with anyone, ever, under any circumstances. They agreed to take it to the grave. And here's the crazy thing. At one point, these two even landed on a yard together in Salinas Valley, B Yard. And if Bellon was feeling some type of way towards little Scarecrow, then he definitely kept it close to himself because he never addressed it. Nor did he ever give any indication that there was ever any static between them. These are pictures of when they were on the yard together in Salinas Valley. And it was during this time that little Scarecrow bailed Bellon out of several bad situations that he got himself wrapped up in. Again, like in the county jail over clavo. But I'll get into all that later after I finish telling you guys what happened. So I believe it was sometime around 2022 or 2023 that Bellon decided to do several tell-all interviews on YouTube. And during these interviews, he basically talks about the circumstances surrounding all the criminal activity he's ever been involved in. He talks about his life, and then for whatever reason, he paints little Scarecrow in a negative light. The same guy that got on the stand and got him exonerated. Then he talks about the liquor store robbery and how it all went bad. He talks about the second case that they caught in the LA County Jail. And then he just did a lot of self-embellishment and self-glorification to placate his own ego and to basically put himself up on a pedestal. And if that wasn't bad enough, he even lied about some of the things he talked about and twisted up the narrative to make himself look like he was the good guy who was deserving of all the honor and praise. Then he goes on to take credit for beating the first body that he was charged with, and never once mentions the fact that little Scarecrow got on the stand and confessed so that he could take that whole case on the chin. So after the first interview that he did on YouTube, he goes on to do several other interviews on lockup and rants on and on about the fact that he was in such a state of disbelief that the jury had actually found him not guilty, as if he was dumbfounded and had no idea why the jury found him not guilty, leading the viewers to believe that he had pulled a slick one. Again, he never mentions the fact that the only reason why this happened is because little Scarecrow got on the stand and confessed. You know, when you admit something this big, it's just as bad as lying about it. Then he goes on a long dissertation and attempts to assassinate little Scarecrow's character and berates him for somehow not being loyal to him. You know, you guys will understand where all this stems from later on in the story, but it all stems from something that happened while they were still in the LA County Jail fighting their case. In short order, after helping him and getting to a point where he couldn't do nothing else for him, little Scarecrow honored a green light that was placed on Bellon by 3 reputable Mexican Mafia members: Eulalio Martinez, Lalo from Lomas, Henry Carlos, Indio from El Sereno, and Javier Marquez, gangster from the Avenues. And this was all self-inflicted behind something that he did to himself. But the bigger question is why Bellon felt the need to speak on this during the interviews. And if he was still holding on to some type of animosity about it, then why didn't he address it when they were on the yard together? Because I mean, let's keep it real. The only thing that stood between them at that time was time, opportunity, and thin air. At any rate, after little Scarecrow seen some of these interviews and heard about it from some of his boys that were both in and out of prison, he stewed on it for several months and tried to register the level of betrayal that he was feeling. He never played the victim, and he never cried about the path that he chose to take in life. He's always stood on his own and accepted the fate that he knew he consciously brought on himself. But even in light of how Bellon betrayed him, little Scarecrow continued to live by the pact and the agreement that these two made to each other. But then one interview turned into 2, 2 turned into 3, 3 turned into 4, 4 turned into 5, and before you know it, you think that Bellon was auditioning for a popularity contest or something. The interviews kept racking up. There were so many that little Scarecrow lost track, and it ended up becoming to be a circus act. But after little Scarecrow's younger nephews came up to visit him with the rest of his family, and they began questioning him about why this guy was on YouTube talking foul about him, that was the turning point that made him change his mind. He said, I had accepted the fact that Pelon had broken our pact and his silence. I just looked at it as it being a true reflection of his own character. But when I had to explain to my little nephews why he was on YouTube saying the things that he was saying, that's when all bets were off. That's when he knew he had to speak his truth. Why not? The pact was already broken. So the purpose of this follow-up story is basically about Scarecrow breaking his silence and giving him an opportunity to tell his truth. So I'm going to lay the story out for you guys and tell you a little bit about what's happened since these two were convicted. Then I'm going to tell you how Pelon betrayed the pact that he made with the same individual that not only copped to a body for him, but also rescued him in several situations. And then finally, in the end, you guys are going to hear from little Scarecrow himself so that he can elaborate on anything he needs to say while he speaks his piece. Anyways, now that I put this story in context for you guys and kind of laid out the basic fundamentals, I'm going to take you guys back to 1997 and walk you through the details of when they caught their controlling case. So again, on November 7th, 1997, little Scarecrow from Northside Redondo and Pelon from Northside Redondo allegedly both participated in robbing a liquor store that was located on McKay Lane and Artesia Boulevard in Redondo Beach. So the area where this store was located was known and referred to by its local residents as Little India, due to the high and dense demographics of people who were of Middle Eastern descent in that area. So during the robbery, the store's owner, Sammy Judy, was apparently shot and killed during the commission of a robbery, which basically ended up qualifying this case to be a capital punishment offense. So I don't know exactly how they ended up getting busted, but at some point, little Scarecrow and Pelon, they both end up in the LA County Jail. And they're both charged with the case that would eventually gain a lot of media attention. And not just in Southern California, but across the country as well. So because of their prior histories and known affiliations as being active Northside Redondo gang members, the jail's gang intel unit houses them both in 3200, the gang module. You know, I talked about this before in some of my other stories that involved the LA County Jail, but keep in mind, this happened back in 1997. So since then, the way the gang module was ran might have changed over the years and might have operated different since all this happened. Some of you would know better than me, but back then, besides the gang module in 3200, you also had the Maravilla modules in 3400 that was split in two sides. Abel Row and Charlie Row was all Maravilla gang members on one side, and then you had Baker Row and Denver Row that was all Bloods on the other side. Similar to how 3200 was set up, but in 3200, Abel Row was what you would consider to be the younger Sureños. Most of them hadn't even been to the joint yet. And they were known within the jail as the Assassins or the Assassinos. Baker Row was where they kept some of the older seasoned Sureños, and they were known within the jail as the Sharks. And then on the other side of 3200 is where they housed the Woods or the white inmates. And then finally, Denver Row is where they house all the Chinos or the Asian brothers. So originally, little Scarecrow was housed on Abel Row, and then after an incident happened over there, they moved him to Baker Row, where this other incident took place. Again, I broke down how that part of the jail was being operated at that time, but this particular cell that these guys were in, cell 5, was referred to as the Northside Redondo cell. You know, these types of things change over the course of time, but the only reason why this cell was referred to as the Northside Redondo cell is because the 4 individuals that were in that cell, little Scarecrow, Pelon, and 2 others, Dennis Morris, Veneno, and Red Hoof Culberson, Striker, were all from Northside Redondo. If they would have all left and then 2 weeks later, 4 other guys moved in that were all from the avenues, then that cell would have been referred to as the Avenue cell. It's as simple as that. These kinds of territorial driven titles are established in county jails and prisons based solely on numbers and dominance. When you have the numbers and you establish an area or a territory like this, that's how it's represented. At any rate, little Scarecrow, Pelon, Veneno, and Striker were all housed in the gang module in 3200 Abel Row in cell 5. And the other thing I want to clarify is that even though they housed some reputable Sureños in the gang module that might have been delegated positions within their leadership, this wasn't known to be headquarters, and this wasn't where they housed Mexican Mafia members. They housed these guys in 1750 in another part of the jail that they called High Power. And at the time when all this was going on, the late Eddie Castro, a Mexican Mafia member who they called Dead-Eye Eddie from V&E, who's also the brother of Ernest Castro, Chuco from V&E, was running the jail. So anyways, according to little Scarecrow, there was 2 trustees that were responsible for running the 4000 floor. And that was Lucky from Florencia and Weddle from Eastside Torrance. They were responsible for everything that happened on the 4000 floor. So aside from sweeping and mopping the floors and handling all their other responsibilities as trustees, they were also responsible for running all the deed back to 1750 and facilitating all the communications that came through. Working as a trustee like this was a highly coveted position within the jail because it not only gave them the freedom to move around and navigate on the 4,000 floor, but on the flip side, the bigger perk was that it presented you with an opportunity to earn kickbacks. The money you'd make running D and hustling on the tier. It opened up a lot of doors. But keep in mind that in order for you to maintain this position as a trustee without any problems, the money you'd make running D and hustling on the tier, it opened up a lot of doors. But keep in mind that in order for you to maintain this position as a trustee without any problems, such as bringing in or moving collateral, securing it without tampering with it and making sure that it gets to where it's supposed to go, etc., etc. Otherwise, if you didn't, you were going to create a world of problems for yourself. And according to Little Scarecrow, that's exactly what happened to Lucky and Weddle. They were accused of intercepting Glauber that was supposed to be going to 1750, and then supposedly they were keeping it for themselves. I'm not sure how Lucky got caught up in all this, but Weddle was the main one behind it, and he was the one that was in hot water. However, apparently Weddle was smart enough to know not to tamper with the black that was coming in for 1750 because he knew how serious the Mexican mafia was when it came to their black. So instead, he started pinching Yeska or just taking a little bit that came in altogether, and this is what got him in trouble. And Little Scarecrow said that it was crumbs, that he wasn't taking a lot, just a little bit here and there. But personally, I don't even think it was about the amount that he was taking. I think it was the principle and just the fact that he was stealing from the Mexican mafia. So I guess what ended up happening is at some point, Deadeye Eddie realizes that the little bit of Yeska that's supposed to be making its way to 1750 isn't making it up there. That somebody's either intercepting it or tampering with their packages. And because of this, he gets this idea in his head that somebody's stealing. And as a result, they end up conducting an investigation. And they basically backtrack the route, finding out everybody's hands that these packages went through, the process of elimination. And this process ends up leading them to Weddle. I've said this before in some of my other stories, but one of the things that the Mexican mafia takes very serious is someone who gets caught stealing or tampering with their product. They take it very serious, and the perpetrators are dealt with swiftly and severely. At any rate, when all this comes to light, Weddle and Lucky are housed somewhere on the 4,000 floor. But someone reaches out to them and basically tells them that their presence is being requested and that they need to report to the gang module. And they basically advise both of them that they were being accused of an infraction, and in order to resolve it, they need to report to the gang module ASAP. I'm not sure where they ended up housing Lucky, but they ended up housing Weddle on Baker Road. So initially, they end up selling him up with an older guy from the Avenues in cell 8, a couple cells down from where Little Scarecrow, Pelon, Striker, and Veneno were housed. And keep in mind, from this point on, the investigation was already over. Deadeye Eddie had basically already put a green light on him, so his number was up. And at this point, plans were already being formulated to either push up in Weddle's cell and take him out there, or to create a ruse and lure him in their cell so that they could take him out there. But after 2 days of being on the tier, a situation plays out that falls right into their hands. Weddle and his cellie end up bumping heads. They're not getting along. So Little Scarecrow tells Weddle to move in with them, and they play this under the pretenses of it being a harbor area thing. In other words, with all them being from Northside Redondo and Weddle being from Eastside Torrance, they make it seem like they're embracing the harbor area card. And Weddle goes for the hook, line, and sinker. He's oblivious to what's at play here and has no idea that he just walked into a diabolical trap. The other thing that helped is that Little Scarecrow had known Weddle several years before this. They knew each other from the streets. And despite the fact that Little Scarecrow said that Weddle was a good dude on a personal tip, this was all business, so none of that mattered. So I'm not going to go into all the details and give you guys a play-by-play breakdown of how they knocked Weddle down. If you guys want to hear about that, you can go back and watch the first story that I ran on this. I go into all the details in that other story. This is just a quick overview of what happened and what's transpired between Little Scarecrow and Pelon since they've been convicted. And keep in mind, I'll be interviewing Little Scarecrow about all this, and that interview will be featured in this story. So if he wants to elaborate on all that, that's entirely up to him. What I will say is this: the way Weddle met his demise was done ruthlessly and was done without mercy. Put it like this: after they lured Weddle into the cell and the wheels started turning and he realized what was happening, I'm sure he understood how grave the circumstances were that he was in, and that this was a situation that he wasn't going to make it out of. Think about it. He's locked in the cell with 4 other dudes: Little Scarecrow, Pelon, Striker, and Veneno. They're in there kicking it, telling war stories, and then at some point, these 4 individuals that he thought were his homies, they ended up turning on him and they start strangling him. That's all bad, because in a situation like that, it's a well-known proven fact that that's the fastest, quietest, cleanest, most effective way of taking someone out. So I'm pretty sure Weddle knew that he was in a bad situation. So at some point, a banger comes out along with a section of pipe that they were able to break off after the welding broke. And before I move on, I'll just say this. Besides strangling someone, stabbing someone to death is probably one of the most personal and most intimate forms of taking someone's life that there is. It's nothing like shooting someone and then walking away. You become involved in the process. And again, stabbing someone and watching them bleed out is a very intimate, up close and personal way of taking someone's life. You feel their body react every time you stab them, and it's just the whole part of extracting their blood that makes it that much more intimate. So Weddle was choked out, bashed in the head with this section of pipe, and then he was stabbed until he was completely immobilized. And then later on, in order for them to move the body out of the cell and put it in the shower, the Chinos on Denver Road created a diversion and flooded the tier. And the reason that they did this was to give Little Scarecrow, Pelon, Striker, and Veneno a reason to get their door popped so that they could come out on the tier and mop up the standing water. This is when the body was wrapped in sheets and carried into the shower. You know, these types of homicides are always violent and sometimes they're hard to watch. But in this underground world of prison and gang politics, it's just part of that lifestyle. And unfortunately, like I said before, if you're playing by all the rules and you're living under that belief system, then sometimes these types of things become necessary. As of lately, you guys have had an opportunity to see some of these homicides happen due to the number of prison videos that have been circulating on social media. Some of you who haven't been to prison are finally starting to see these things yourselves. But for those of us who have been to prison and who have seen it before, it's just a reminder that these are the types of things that happen in prison all the time. Anyways, fast forward sometime around March or April of 1999, Little Scarecrow and Pelon go to trial on the first case that they caught together, which was the liquor store murder robbery. And again, based on Perico's influence and what he told Little Scarecrow about doing the right thing and taking the case, that it didn't make no sense in both of them going down together, Little Scarecrow gets up on the stand and confesses to committing the crime all by himself. Think about that. At the age of 24, with your whole life ahead of you, or at any age for that matter, that's a highly respectable thing to do. Though during this time and day, it's hard to find people that would cop to a dope case or an assault, let alone a body. But during this day and time, it's hard to find people that would cop to a dope case or an assault, let alone a body. So the level and magnitude of what Little Scarecrow did shouldn't be overlooked. And look at this picture that was taken by the media of Little Scarecrow in the back of Pelon's head after Little Scarecrow was found guilty by the jury. When I look at this picture, the expression on Little Scarecrow's face says 1,000 different words. Obviously, the main thing that it's symbolic of is that this is a 24-year-old youngster that just basically threw his entire life away. And it's to look to Pelon saying, "I got you, bro. We got one in." Scarecrow said that Pelon was crying so hard, he had the hiccups. So at the time when Little Scarecrow did this, there was another individual named Slick from Puente Blackwood that followed suit and did the same thing for his co-defendant. I guess this was something that was being recognized and respected within the jail at that time. And again, both Slick and Little Scarecrow were both influenced by what Perico had did for his older brother years ago. Anyways, to wrap this part of it up, even though Little Scarecrow confessed to the robbery and took the body off of Pelon, the district attorney was so upset and livid about the fact that Pelon had been acquitted on these charges that he still found a way to wipe Pelon out over a little bit of D that he had in his pocket at the time he was arrested. So now fast forward, after Little Scarecrow, Pelon, Striker, and Veneno all get charged with Weddle's homicide, they all get moved to different parts of the jail and they begin the routine of preparing for trial all over again. And surprisingly, everybody holds their mud. You know, it's not too common these days that this many individuals end up catching a case like this and they all stay solid. But they all did. Nobody folded or tapped out. And keep in mind that by this time, which was about a year and a half later, Deadeye Eddie had already caught a chain to prison. And 3 other Mexican Mafia members had since taken over the jail. As I mentioned earlier, they were Gangster from the Avenues, Lalo from Lomas, and Indio from El Sereno. Anyways, at one point, Pelon ends up in 3300, which is known or referred to in the jail as Junior High Power. It's a housing unit where they've been known to house former cops and other high-profile inmates. So Pelon lands on this tier with late Mexican Mafia member Jimmy Sanchez, Smokey from VNE. And while he's back there on this tier, he ends up getting himself in trouble for supposedly and ironically for the same thing he participated in taking Wedo out for stealing for the Mexican Mafia. In short order, he intercepted a package that was supposed to go to 1750, and instead of forwarding it like he was supposed to, instead he claimed that he started selling it to make these guys some money. This was clavo that was coming in from someone who had just established an open pipeline, and when this happened, Smokey from VNE had already left. Think about it. Not only does that sound like a bunch of hogwash, but when it comes to clavo coming into the county jail, why would anyone think that the Mexican Mafia would rather have someone selling their clavo than having the clavo itself? In a situation like that, nobody cares about no money. These guys want their D, because I guarantee you, before they start selling it, they're going to want to get loaded first. They're going to want to save the majority of it for themselves. Those are facts. Anyways, when these guys start looking into why this package never made its way to 1750, they run an investigation the same way Deadeye Eddie did. They backtrack the route. And eventually they find out that Pelon is the one responsible for it. Needless to say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And these guys are so upset about it that they greenlight Pelon without even giving them the benefit of an explanation. So there was something close to 6 grams that came in. And according to Pelon, he sold 4 and then he forwarded the last 2 to 1750. This didn't negate the green light. They still wanted his head on a platter. But lo and behold, his boy, little Scarecrow, he ends up hearing about this and he helps get the green light rescinded, which again proves and reinforces the loyalty that he had for this guy. So what does little Scarecrow do? He turns to Perico, his padrino, and he pleads with him to salvage Pelon. And that's basically what happens. Perico had a lot of respect in that jail. He had been around a long time, and even the other Mexican Mafia members that were there had a lot of respect for him. I think the only one that had been around for as nearly as long as him was Lalo. So Perico issues Pelon a hefty fine and he agrees to clear him. So now fast forward, Pelon ends up moving to another part of the jail, 2904, that's also considered to be like another high power. It's known within the jail as Deep Seg, but this time he ends up landing on the tier with an individual by the name of Sergio Aguilar, Silent from Blythe Street. And according to Little Scarecrow, this individual, Silent, was an illegitimate Mexican Mafia member that had everybody believing, Pelon included, that he was a señor and that he was running that part of the jail. And due to the fact that Pelon was under the belief that this guy was who he really said he was, Pelon started collecting taxes and clavo on Silent's behalf. And all the clavo that was supposed to be going to 1750, Pelon had redirected to 2904. You would have thought that Pelon would have learned his lesson by now, but unfortunately for him, he kept getting himself caught up in these kind of jams over clavo that was either tampered with, came up missing, or that he was somehow involved with. The irony in that is crazy, but this time, unfortunately for him, Little Scarecrow couldn't do anything to help him. In fact, since Little Scarecrow was the only one that had physical access to him during their court movement, the assignment was given to him. And to Little Scarecrow, it was obvious that Pelon was done this time. After helping him the first time, he basically seen that he was on his way out. So when he started circling the drain the second time, he knew that he had to make some tough choices. Anyways, later on, when Pelon would do all these interviews and started playing the victim, he claimed that Little Scarecrow betrayed him when he agreed to carry out this green light and hit him. That he was the one who was betrayed. So just to put this in perspective, after taking a body for him, assisting him with catching a second body, bailing him out once when he convinced Perico to save him while they were still active, and then saving him from getting hit twice when they were on S and Ys, he still had the audacity to say that he was the one who was betrayed. By then, this guy probably forgot what betrayal felt like. And it wasn't Little Scarecrow's job to keep helping this guy get back on the right side of the fold either, especially when he was the one that kept getting himself caught up. Why would Pelon even expect that? But Little Scarecrow still did it because that's just the kind of stand-up guy he was. When he considered you to be his homie, that's how high he set the bar, and that's a testament to his own character. Little Scarecrow had went above and beyond proving his loyalty. So, unless he was insinuating that he expected Little Scarecrow to sabotage his own career after getting LWAP, knowing that he was about to spend the rest of his life in prison, it's just a crazy thing to say. Why would anyone in their right state of mind even suggest something like that? So let me take you guys back to 2001. After going to trial for the in-house homicide that Little Scarecrow, Pelon, Striker, and Veneno were all charged with, all of them, with the exception of Veneno, get found guilty. Little Scarecrow gets found guilty of homicide with special circumstances. Striker gets found guilty of homicide, and Pelon gets found guilty as well. Veneno got found guilty of conspiracy, but in the end, it didn't matter. The DA was playing hardball, and all of them didn't get no less than 25 to life anyway. Crow was the only one that got LWOP, and that was based on the circumstances surrounding his first case, as well as the role he played in the in-house homicide. And here's the crazy thing about it. A couple of months after these guys allegedly took Weddle out, another homicide was committed in 3200, the gang module on Abel Road. Smiley from A Street, Moreno from Cam, Lazy from Compton CC, and Travieso from Santos were all charged with the second homicide. Apparently this guy came in that had some issues, and somehow these guys found out that this guy got on the phone, called his mom, and told her to have the jail move him out of that cell. Otherwise, he was going to have serious problems. They either picked up on his body language or somehow something happened and they ended up finding out about it. And before the jail could facilitate the move, these guys ended up mollywopping this guy so bad that he ended up dying later from a massive subdural hematoma. His brain was bleeding. And that incident right there effectively shut down the gang module. They started putting everyone in single man cells. So as I mentioned earlier, while these guys were still in the LA County jail going to trial on the in-house homicide, Pelon ends up getting himself caught up in those two situations. And again, Little Scarecrow helped Pelon the first time, but after the second time, there was nothing that he could do to help him, and that was basically the end of Pelon's career. And after everything he did to help Pelon, I'm sure Little Scarecrow didn't want to hit him. But now it came to a point where if he didn't hit Pelon, he was going to end up getting hit himself. So that was a no-brainer. So now fast forward to June 6, 2001. Little Scarecrow catches a chain to prison and begins his journey by spending the next 10 years in the SHU at Pelican Bay. The SHU literally becomes his training grounds as he was indoctrinated by several different Mexican mafia members that he was back there with. But then later, after finding himself on the wrong side of dirty politics, Little Scarecrow also gets betrayed and sees the hypocrisy in the lifestyle that he gave his life to. At some point, he too finds himself on a SMY, and years later, he ends up crossing paths with Pelon at Salinas Valley State Prison on B Yard. And keep in mind that since Pelon was documented as being one of Little Scarecrow's victims in the LA County Jail, they both have to sign a release of liability chrono. A chrono that the inmates refer to as a marriage slip. And this basically clears the way for these guys to be removed from each other's enemy lists. And now they can function or program on the same yard. And again, these pictures that I showed you guys earlier are pictures of Little Scarecrow and Pelon when they were together on the yard at Salinas Valley. In the group pictures, Little Scarecrow is standing up in the back on the left. And here's a picture that they took together. If Pelon was harboring any kind of animosity, he sure did do a good job at hiding it. And keep in mind, these pictures were taken after Little Scarecrow hit Pelon in the LA County Jail, and several years before Pelon decided to break their pact and do all these interviews. But anyways, while these guys are out there together on an SMY, Pelon continues to get himself caught up in the same kind of drama that he did in the LA County Jail. But anyways, while these guys are out there on these SMYs, Pelon continues to get himself in wrecks. He wasn't a popular guy out there, and he wasn't liked by a lot of people. And the crazy part about it is that all his problems stemmed from debts and clavo that he owed. So the first time Pelon had an issue, again, it was Little Scarecrow that had his back and helped him. And according to Little Scarecrow, the individuals that wanted to hit Pelon, they were already putting it in motion. But Little Scarecrow and a small circle of individuals that he was kicking it with out there on the yard, they put a security blanket around Pelon. They basically told these guys that if they came at Pelon, that they were gonna all go up. And then the second time that Pelon got caught up, it was with an individual that was affiliated with the Zapatistas, one of the more violent SMY gangs that exist out there on these kind of yards. They also wanted to move on him, and even went as far as eluding the paperwork that they had on him. But once again, it was Little Scarecrow and his boys that ended up putting a security blanket on him and stopped it from happening once again. So that's the basis of this story. Now that you guys have all the facts, you guys can decide yourself who was the one who was betrayed. And not only that, but who was the one who showed loyalty time and time again. You know, after everything that's happened and during the entire journey that these two traveled together, it's at this point now that Pelon starts pumping out these interviews. And I'll be honest, I watched most of these interviews, and it's obvious that he not only enjoys being in front of these cameras, but he also enjoys stroking his own ego. For example, during the lockup interviews, he alluded to performing some type of ritualistic thing on Weddle's body after he met his demise. He said something to the effect that he lit a bong and placed it on Weddle's limp body that was in the early stages of decomposition, and that he did this to cook some food. He also talked about people starting rumors about an eyeball that was said to have been missing, things that were said for effect, and he almost plays along with this insidious role that he puts on, as if he enjoys or languishes in the thought of committing acts of violence. Little Scarecrow said that when he watched it, some of it didn't even make sense, and that he was rambling on like he was in some kind of trance, and that it was almost like he was going off the deep end. At any rate, now that I put this story in context for you guys and hopefully have broken it down in a way that's easy for you to understand, besides offering you my opinion and giving you my 2 cents, I don't think that there's a whole lot more that I can say. I'll leave you guys with some closing thoughts like I always do, but before I do that, I think it's time for you guys to hear from Little Scarecrow himself and to give him an opportunity to speak his own truth. With that being said, let me just start this out first by welcoming Little Scarecrow to the channel and by also extending my gratitude for allowing Paradigm Media News to be a part of this story.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate it, bro. Like, first and foremost, today, like, the people who matter most to me, my wife, my grandson, my son, you know, my stepson, my family, those are the people that I pour all this energy, all that energy I used to pour into bullshit, into that lifestyle. I now pour that into my family. And when my nephew and my nieces during visiting start mentioning this fucking clown, like, hey, what's up with this dude, man? This dude's over here fucking speaking on you, talking shit, and I'm asking them, well, what's he saying? And they don't even want to say. That's kind of what woke me up out of my slumber, bro. Because for the past whatever years, I'm doing me. I've been doing me. Like, I'm not concerned with him. Like, in fact, like, we were Salinas Valley killing. Like, so all this animosity. Where was this energy, bro? Like, where's this energy? Like, he could have. We were there a couple years ago. He could have came at me with the same energy. You feel me? And going back to his interviews, never once in those interviews does he talk about what me and him spoke about on the county bus. Like, I'm not even gonna clown him, put him out there like he ain't no weak dude. He wasn't a weak dude. But me and him, like, we shared smiles, we shared frowns, we shared ups and downs, fucking, we laughed together, we fucking, man, bro, we kind of laughed together, we cried together. Like, that was my homeboy, that was my bro. So for him, all these years later, to shit on basically me fucking stepping up and bro, taking a fucking murder. Keep in mind, like, I'm responsible for my own shit. But during that interview, bro, he's talking about, I told him he knows what he better do. Motherfucker, do crime, do time, bro. If you're gonna fucking do crime, do your fucking time. And that's all fucking fictional, homie. All this shit that he told me I needed to do, he didn't tell me a fucking thing. I did that because that's what I thought at that young age that I was standing on principle, homie. Like, I thought I was doing what gangsters do. I thought that's what you're supposed to do, you know. And I mentioned that equal broken metal.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
That was the man I looked up to most in this world. And when he was young, he did that for his brother, you know. And I'm thinking, you know, fuck it, why two people, you know, why two people fall, you know. I was the one who had the gun that night. And just quickly, like, I didn't go in there with the intention of doing that. And I don't want to disparage Sammy, you know, rest in peace. I ain't trying to dredge all that up, but, you know, I take responsibility for that. But years later to hear him just piss on that, bro. When it happened, he swore on his children's eyes that we, no matter what, to thick and thin, we fucking rocking this out. Like it blew my mind. To hear this fictional story he tells, like it's pretty shocking to me. It fucked me up. It fucked me up. I didn't get to see all of it, but I was told, oh, he's saying, I'm a turncoat. Turncoat to what? For stabbing him? I'm a fucking turncoat? Those were sanctioned hits, bro. Like those were things he brought upon himself from bad decisions he made. Those were calls made by the big homies, dog. Like I'm not just willy-nilly stabbing people because I want to. I'm not just. You can't just fucking stab people because you want to in LA County jail. You gotta answer to somebody. So if he's saying I'm a turncoat for stabbing him, then he's calling himself the cause, homie. Like he ain't the cause. He ain't the cause. If stabbing him is being the turncoat, he's basically ascribing himself the term cause. He's that cause, and he ain't the fucking cause. Ain't none of us the cause. We're all just cogs in the machine, bro. We're all just cogs in this machine, just moving in one direction. And like those the oaths you mentioned, like those are things that everybody out there who participates in this knows. There's unwritten shit, unwritten rules. Like it's shit that the little homies from the neighborhood, every neighborhood, they pushing their beliefs. They rocking with these oaths. So I really, really was blown away by these interviews you did, bro. Like that's I don't know. Like that's a fictional dude. That's a fictional character. Now I don't fucking know that dude because, like I said, there was no but air and opportunity between us, and he could have got with it, and he didn't. So I don't know. Maybe he feels like he wants to run it back in that fashion. But that's bullshit. That's another thing that bothered me. Like I guess felt that he was using some dime store psychology by complimenting my father and my mom and my sisters. I guess he thought he was using some fucking weak ass psychology, but little does he know, like that shit's transparent as fuck. We all hate him. We all hate him. You know what I mean? Fuck that fool, man. We all hate him. And
this call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Yeah, I don't know where he got off thinking like big Scarecrow as mom. Man, fuck him. Fuck that dog. Like you can't disrespect me and expect my family to fucking be cool. Like I'm gonna let you diss my sister and I'm gonna be cool with you, bro, because you said something nice about me. Got me fucked up. Like you got to get fucked up, homie. You got to get fucked up. But really, like I appreciate you taking some time out to set the record straight, bro. I don't wanna be on here too much spitting vitriol, bro. But I'm also not of the turn the other cheek either. And this dude knows, man. He fucking knows. We did the most together. We did the most together. We rolled. We did the most together. We held our mud. And this is how he wants to close the chapter. He don't get the fucking final word. He don't get the final word. Like I'm not gonna have my grandson one day see what he said and let that be the fucking exclamation point to our story. And all for naught, bro. If I could turn it back to the hands of time, trust me, I would do things way different. Swimming in them waters is treacherous for everybody involved. It's like junior high, but with deadly consequences. It's fucking popularity contest, it's gossip, it's junior high, but for real life cutthroat consequences. It's a cold game. It's human nature. Sometimes that is worse. I've also seen the best. I've also been in the hole where man, we're splitting one tray 6 ways because we were all on fucking juke balls on discipline diet. When we all self-extracted, like some of my most beautiful moments, like, were in the game, you know, like, motherfuckers really all for one for all. But that shit changes. That shit, you know, you move from one place to the next and you're with a different group of motherfuckers and it's a different game. Like, it's a different get down, you know?
Yeah.
That whole fucking, the whole topic of loyalty, man, in this game, it only goes so far because anybody that got a light on them, that loyalty can't stand. That person, anybody who chooses to rock with you, they're going to inherit that light. They're going to inherit that green light. That's contagious, you know?
Yeah.
So loyalty is only goes so far as long as everything's Gucci. The minute it ain't Gucci, like, yeah, it's fickle, bro. It's fickle. And that's why at 51 years old, I get to pick and choose who I want to be friends with. I pick and choose. You know, a friend of mine from 20 years, I'm back in touch with him. Man, bro, like that's it's a good thing when you guys can talk about high school and shit. You know what I mean? Like people don't forget about it. I've been in here 27, going on 28 years, and you know, you don't even realize, but there is people who still hold you down. You know?
Yeah, most definitely.
Still hold you down. Yeah, that's yeah. But yeah, loyalty is in prison, in the game, it's tricky, bro. It's tricky.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Yeah, well, you know, I know you know your family's gonna hear this, man. Is there anything you want to say to your family, man? To your sister, your moms, pops, anybody, your kids, bro? Anything?
Oh yeah, you know everybody knows I'm a burden. You know I love you. To the boys, Gabe, Leo, Rachel, everybody. I love you guys. But Jesse, Junebug, Mary, Frankie, Andrew, my baby KK, Gloria, everybody. I love all of them. I love everybody.
That's right.
That big Northside Redondo, those nietos, all the time. I appreciate you, though, homie. I really do. Thank you. Thank you for affording me this opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. So there you guys have it. After all these years and after all these videos were aired out on YouTube and lockup about his case and who he is, you guys finally got the missing piece of this tragic, unfortunate, convoluted story. You know, since I ran the first story on this case, I've gotten to know little Scarecrow on a personal level, and he's a good dude. In fact, since I've been managing this channel on YouTube and since I've been putting out these kinds of stories, I met a lot of good dudes that ended up throwing their lives away behind one bad choice or several bad choices that were all part of one event. That's all it took. And now for some, after 15, 20, or 25 years, they're still existing in a world of uncertainty, not knowing one way or the other if they're ever gonna make it back home to see that world that they remember from so many years ago. Wondering if a law is going to change, if they might prevail on an appeal, or if some other type of miracle might someday impact them. It's a dismal and miserable existence to live in, and some of you youngsters out there need to pay close attention to some of these stories that are being told, as there's lessons and messages to learn from. All you have to do is listen. You know, there's no question about the fact that some of these guys have changed from the individuals that they were 20 years ago before they entered the system. Little Scarecrow said it best himself when we were talking about a lot of this stuff the other day on the phone. He said, I'm on some grandpa type shit now, Box. I'm trying to be a husband. I'm trying to be a father. I'm trying to be a son. I'm trying to be a grandfather. I'm just trying to enjoy life the best way I can, and I'm just trying to enjoy my family while I still have them around. You know, like I said in one of my other recent stories, for those of us that are lucky, one day a light's gonna go on and our whole perspective is gonna change. We're gonna see the world through a different lens. And this is when you transition and change your way of thinking. Yet others will stay stagnated and trapped in their own alter ego, the same guy that they used to be, because they won't allow themselves to change their thinking patterns. You know, little Scarecrow definitely lived an eventful life, and he definitely made some bad choices along the way. But I honestly believe that there's a lot of guys like him that, if given the chance, they would get out, ride off into the sunset, and would go on to live a positive, quiet, trouble-free life, and that they'd never be heard from again. You know, as for some of the backbiting, the deception, and the betrayal that little Scarecrow experienced from Pelon, you know, who knows what will happen if these two ever cross paths again. But it's still mind-boggling how some people can turn on you out of nowhere when you've done nothing but good for them. Where does it even come from when it's completely unprovoked and unwarranted? Sometimes it doesn't even make sense. When you've taken losses and made personal sacrifices for no other reason than to help them and to do what's in their best interest. This is something that I can definitely relate to. You know, I've been on the same side of it many times myself, and it came so far out of left field that I didn't even know where it came from. It's crazy, but sometimes people create their own illusions in their own mind, either because of their own demons or because they just start thinking about something too much. It's almost too much to comprehend, but this is something that exists everywhere around you, in every walk of life and in every facet. You know, I honestly believe that Pelon is living in his own karma right now. All the bad things that he's inflicted on other people throughout the years is finally starting to come back tenfold. And this is the reality that he's living in. You know, you can only go through life walking all over people and abusing others for so long before it finally comes back and you reap what you sow. You know, I'm not religious and I'm not a superstitious guy, but I do believe in karma, and I do believe that everything in life comes full circle. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Paradigm Profiles. If you guys liked this episode, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like this episode, give it a thumbs down. But either way, drop a comment and let me know what you think. And again, something else that's important that I'm going to continue reminding you guys about is to not only hit the like, drop a comment, and share the video, but to also hit the all symbol on the notification bell so that you're notified anytime I drop content. So with that being said, as always, I just want to thank those of you who continue to show your unwavering loyalty and also for continuing to tap into the channel. In the meantime, you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Keep pushing that positivity. And until the next one, this is your boy B, and I'm gone.